Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Fast Away podcast. I am so excited for my conversation today with Betty Murray. Betty, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
So, you and I met at a JJ Virgin event. JJ is a good friend of mine and also happens to be my neighbor. And we met in Tampa and had such a great conversation. I was like, oh my goodness, I need this woman on the podcast speaking to our Fast Away community because you are so in tune with the pain points that many of my clients have. So, share with us a little bit about when and why you entered into the wellness industry. And then we're going to talk about your core competency when it comes to wellness.
Yeah. So, I think most people come into this not because, everything's wonderful and they feel fabulous. It's usually they themselves get sick or somebody in their family. I entered into the functional medicine arena through a colitis diagnosis. And at the time, I was able to, sort of recover from that with diet lifestyle. I thought kind of, okay, I've hit the gamut. I'm doing great. This is wonderful. This is where I'm going to hang my hat. And then I hit my late 30s, early 40s, right? And I had actually gone through a tubal, right? At the time, I didn't want kids, I wanted to kind of control my fertility, and I also didn't want to be on the pill. And so I thought tubal is the best way to go. I did that, and everybody's like, "You're going to feel fine." Within 6 months of that, my hair's falling out. I'm getting acne on my chin. I was a bodybuilder for 8 years. It's not like I didn't know how to manage body composition. All of a sudden, I gained 35 pounds in about 6 months
Mm.
and start this sort of roller coaster 40s, right? And I had access to all the best functional medicine people. I own a really big medical clinic in Dallas. I have access to the luminaries. And we started this sort of hormonal dance, and it was thyroid. It was this. It's your adrenals. It's your estrogen dominant, and you're this and you're that. And everything we tried really didn't get better. And to be honest, I'm 55 today. I hated my 40s so much so that I went back to get a PhD. I finished another master's in the process and a PhD. And my entire research was looking at how women go through this process, the hormonal changes, and particularly around the way our body packages hormones to get rid of them and that impact, and the metabolic changes that happen in perimenopause and menopause. Because, trainers, and this, they're all like, oh no, girl, you just need to work out more and eat less. And I'm like, I already know how to do that. I've done contest diets. I know how to starve myself, like, from the
Yeah.
bodybuilding world. Like,
Hmm.
we know how to do those extreme things. And so that's really where I dug in. And so that's really the hat I hang my entire experience on now, as I help perimenopause and menopausal women, number one, understand the hormonal changes. Number two, correct for those with appropriate bioidentical hormone replacement through my telemedicine company, and make sure that they're doing the right things for their long-term health.
Wow. So the tubal was one of the reasons that your hormones were going haywire. That is so interesting.
Yeah, so they don't tell you this. So a tubal, because they often are either cauterizing or cutting through the tubes to your ovaries, so you don't have an egg, escape into the uterus and potentially get pregnant, will often alter the blood supply to the ovaries. And what we see if in the research is often women who go through tubals or partial hysterectomies and things like that will go through an earlier menopause. Well, for me, it threw me into menopause. Here's the really crazy thing, Amanda. I had a pre-nuvo scan like 2 years ago, and I'm talking to the radiologist, and he goes, "When did you have your ovaries removed?" I was like, "What?" And he's like, "You have no visible ovaries." And because I was like, I had them removed. My body reabsorbed them.
No.
Yes. And no one tells you that. So I'm talking to, some of my physician friends, surgeon friends. They're like, yeah, sometimes that can happen. And I'm like, but women aren't getting informed consent when we go in for all the things that we go in for, because being a woman is painful, difficult, and hard. Right.
Oh my gosh. We could go so many different directions right now. But I first wanna hear just a little bit about your business model, and then we have to loop back on some of this stuff, and again, my head is just, like, spinning with what you just told me because you're absolutely correct. We are not given comprehensive information, adequate information, which means we need to take ownership before we just simply trust the doctor who says, "Yeah, pop in a Mirena." do the da 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 the tubal, do the da da da, and you'll have no side effects, no impact. Do the hormonal birth control. There's no side. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your current business model, and then we're gonna loop back on this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I still own my clinic. So I've owned a clinic for 20 years, tens of thousands of women, and we do take care of men. They just aren't our primary focus because we end up adopting them from their significant others and brothers and things like that. And so we have a clinic where we've been building our framework for over 20 years. And so today we've expanded into telemedicine. So the company's name is the Manurva Project. So Minerva is the goddess of science, medicine, war, just so everybody's clear.
Love it.
Love it. And so today we provide bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for women across the United States. Where we are different than most of the telemedicine companies that are out there is number one, we offer bioidentical hormones. We are genetically informed. So, one of the things that's very important to understand is if you were to line up 100 women, we all look different because our hormones are different. And it's not just about the hormones we make, it's how our body goes through the process of when we're done with them to package it up and throw them in the trash. That's where my entire dissertation was really, focused on is how do we do that? And because those are the areas that we worry about for cancer and other things. And our genes line up with that and determine sort of which direction we go. And so we also look at those labs. So we go further. We do lab testing before and after. We determine efficacy, that it's enough, not too much. And we look at how you package those hormones together and get rid of them so we can manipulate those pathways for safe hormone replacement. And most of the companies, actually all of the big companies out there, do not do that. They're like, oh, girl, if you don't have hot flashes, you're fine. Well, I never had a hot flash. That wasn't one of the million things that I had going on. I've literally never had one. I'm 55. I've been menopausal for 8 years,
Wow.
and so I'm like, if that's my gauge, did your hot flashes go away? Then, I have nothing to gauge it on. Without labs, you're either over treating, under treating, or possibly getting it right. And
Mm.
research indicates that it's like 30, 30, 30, right? Somewhere in there, most of us are either under or over treated. And so we go that extra step. So we wrap the functional medicine model around hormone replacement. And then we have coaches that also help because the reality is every one of us is different. And we're building a technology platform to actually understand that. Because one of the things that happens when you treat is you start usually low and you go slow. But we don't really know how you might change your hormone in that process. Did you go up a little bit? Did you go down a little bit? What about today? What about the next day? Nowhere is that captured. And until we capture that data, I can't get in front of it and say, hey, Amanda, when you end up in this pathway and this issue, based on your science, your laboratory data, your wearable data, here's where we think you're going to go. So let's predictively get in front of it. And I can tell you what you need to do. We don't have that. We don't have women's research. And sorry, today it is not going to happen, right?
Yep.
NIH won't even let us put a grant in for women's health research today. So seriously,
Unbelievable.
zero.
Ugh.
Um, and so our paradigm is not only to build the technology behind it to create basically the largest women's health data private organization so we can create products and services for women without the influence of pharma and medicine, not medicine itself but big medicine, the hospital systems, but to really be able to give directives for women. And so that's what we do. And so we have the telemedicine piece right now. We're funding for the larger technology build because that's a pretty big lift at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about birth control. Let's talk a little bit about the tubal versus an ablation, if you have any expertise there, because now I'm just so curious. Um,
Because that's
you
all.
did?
Yeah. So I got my tubal first, and then after that, my period started coming every 21 days, and it was heavy. And I'm like, I am going to bleed out one day. And so they're like, just get an ablation. It doesn't work anyway. And I was like, okay. So either one of those ablations can also disrupt, right? It makes it basically uninhabitable, right? And it
Right.
can sometimes stops your period, but not always. But all of those things disrupt the function of those organs. And the body knows.
Mm.
The body's not
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. Okay. I have had an ablation. So let's just dive into this a little bit. Tubal versus ablation. So I never, ever in my life had a regular period, ever, until after starting the faster way. So literally high school, college was absolutely horrendous. I mean, just awful. I was on fertility medication to get pregnant with my first 2. Then I created the faster way, and I was able to reverse my polycystic ovary syndrome, okay? Intermittent fasting, carb cycling, whole food nutrition, effective workouts, da 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 da. 3rd was pregnant naturally, 4th, 5th, pregnant naturally. But after my 5th, still just returned to very heavy cycles, okay? Extremely heavy, not that regular. So I worked with an OBGYN who is more functional, and she suggested the ablation, which for me, and I just want to say for me, and every body is different, has been absolutely life changing. Okay. Absolute for me. I am now just turned 39. For the first time ever at 39, I now have regular cycles. It's very interesting. Literally, I'm on time. I still do have a period, but it's very light. Okay. It's just like, it's light. It's so now I'm nervous because you said it can disrupt your hormones. So tell me just a little bit about that. Is that something that could happen, or do you feel like I'm in the clear? It's been 2 years. Everything seems fine.
Yeah, you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, so what's interesting, like your own experience. So the ablation, for anybody that doesn't know, is either done usually with a fan or a balloon, and they basically put it up in there and they cauterize, they singe the inside of the uterus so it can't produce blood supply. And if it's a complete ablation where it works really at its intended thing, you have no periods. So for me, it stopped my periods. But for you, it made them smaller and more on time, right? So there's an impact to your hormones there. And we're like, why? We don't really know. Because obviously you started to normalize where
Right.
you hadn't been before, right?
So weird.
Yeah. Now,
But
now it
great.
does, yeah, it's like, well, that works, right? Because again, I always think we have to weigh these things against, the quality of life and the other experience. Because most women with heavy periods have anemia. They've got other things that go along for the ride.
Mhm.
And I'm happy I did the ablation because I didn't want an IUD, I didn't want, I was basically, on my period all the time. It wasn't really easy to deal with.
Right.
And so for me, it was also a game changer from that standpoint. And I think the ablation itself wasn't as disruptive as the tubal,
Got it.
right?
Got
You
it.
know, but it can. So it can. And so when we look at birth control, particularly the synthetic estrogen that they use, what it does is it binds to the receptor. So all of our hormones have little keys. So they're a key into a lock, right? So the lock is the receptor. Our normal estradiol, our hormone, clicks into the receptor, turns things on, then lets go, and then pulls out, just like you opened your door and now you closed it and you take the key out. Synthetic estrogens that are used in birth control are number one, much higher dose than what we make. Number two, they irreversibly bind to the receptor. So they basically are like a key that go in there and break off, right? Which makes it really good for birth control. That's why we don't have bioidentical forms of birth control. We don't, the pharmaceutical companies aren't going to create it because they can't patent it. And B, we want it to irreversibly bind, right? So you know that you're not going to get pregnant. But the reality is that's not how our body was designed, right? So we have to weigh the fertility control, which I am very, very passionate about. I think it's very important for women to be able to have autonomy over their body, obviously. And number two, the impact to our body, right? Now, the birth control that we use today is much lower dose than what we used, let's say, back in the 70s, but it's still important, and some are worse than others. And then you have like the IUD that's delivering hormones localized, and then they have a progesterone only that we often use in perimenopause. I'm still not a fan because they're all synthetic,
Yes.
right? They're all synthetic. So my mindset from looking at the research as a non-prescriber, I'm a doctor, but I'm a PhD. I'm the thinking side of medicine. Is birth control right now, whether it's IUD or birth control pills, are the closest we have to 100%. Family planning and ovulation testing and all of that still has some risk. Condoms and things like that still have some risk. But I don't think those are appropriate choices to navigate all the way to the end of menopause, the menopause transition. I think at some point you go, okay, I'm going to get off that from a fertility standpoint, see where I'm at, and then start to replace the hormones because they don't end at the same time. Progesterone declines early, testosterone's on a steady roll downhill. Estrogen does bungee jumping for a couple years, on average 8. and then cliff dives one day, right? So
Mm.
we need to address them in appropriate processes at the right time to keep us balanced. Otherwise, we have symptoms for an average of 8 years, which means some of us get them for 14 to 16.
Here's my take on birth control, and I've tried 6 different kinds. I tried the Mirena, I was so blue. As a female, I'm fertile for what, 5, max 6 days a month. My husband, he's fertile every single day of the month. Do you know, Dr. Betty, that they used to test out birth control on men, but they pulled it back because men got moody and had acne and had fill in the blank, every single symptom us women have to deal with, okay? Birth control was made by men for women, so that's 6 days a month, we wouldn't be fertile when the guy is fertile. Here's the deal. I say, "You don't want more kids? Get a vasectomy. You could take one for the team. I deal with everything else." I'm like,
Yeah,
I
and it is a much less invasive thing for a man to get a vasectomy, right? 100%. 100%. The FDA approved male birth control, but you're right. All of the PMS, the weight gain, the bloating, the moodiness, they couldn't handle it, but we're expected to handle it.
oh my gosh, so many of my listeners, their minds are blown because they never knew this. The FDA approved male birth control, but the men couldn't handle the side effects. So they said, "Okay, women, you're expected to handle the side effect." I mean, it's just I don't even get me started on this right now. Do not
Yeah,
even
this
get
could
me
be a
started.
3-hour conversation. The problems in women's research and medicine.
But again, every body is different. So I had the ablation. It was absolutely life-changing for me. I did try the Mirena. So I tried all the other things first. I tried the mini pill, I tried the Mirena, I tried da 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 da. On the Mirena, I was blue. There's no better way to say it. I had the blues. I wasn't fully depressed, but I just wasn't myself. I didn't have the zest for life and the drive that I normally have. I got it out within 3 days. I felt like a cloud was lifted, like, the cloud over my head sailed away into the sunset. It was, like, immediate for me, but everybody is different. So, here's a question I have for you about perimenopause and menopause, and this is gonna be a very naive question. So, I'm 39, I'm in probably the beginning stages of perimenopause, even though I do have a regular cycle. 2 days before my period, I do get 1 hot flash at night, so I know it's coming. It's like I get 1 hot flash and, 2 days before, and then, I'm good. But is there value in me supporting my hormones now to kind of prolong perimenopause, like saying, "Okay, I'm naturally gonna do things to increase progesterone. I'm naturally gonna do things to balance out my estrogen and progesterone. I'm gonna actually just focus on that now in my 30s and early 40s instead of just resigning myself to the fact that I'm gonna need to do hormone replacement therapy." Is that a stupid question? Like, am I even asking the right questions here?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's important. Like, if we look at other, we look at other cultures, right? So, Westernized culture, particularly United States, we statistically have the worst menopause. Not surprising, right? And menopause is that entire transitional period. Perimenopause is where the symptoms really are.
Mhm.
It's longer, it's worse. And then if you look at certain ethnic backgrounds like African American descent or African descent, often have worse periods. But then if you look at other cultures, it's different. Some of that is probably diet and lifestyle related, right? So what brings on menopause is the loss of our eggs. We are born with millions of these, and then over time we lose them very rapidly as women, whereas men regenerate sperm. We don't. Our eggs are kind of whatever we got when we're born. It's the loss of eggs. So when we start into perimenopause, it's that we have cycles that we may have a cycle, but we may not shoot an egg out, right? So we become what they call anovulatory. It's not always consistent. And it means that the egg carton is basically running out of eggs. So when they're out, that's when we officially stop having a period. But you could, all of that time beforehand, if you're eating right and you're sleeping and protecting that, and you're taking care of yourself and you're reducing cortisol and doing all these other things, what you're doing is taking away the other environmental things that we have control of that will make your symptoms worse. More stress, over exercising, under exercising, bad diet, all of those things are going to make your menopausal symptoms, however long they are, way worse. And we probably are preserving our fertility by taking better care of ourselves, right? We don't have good data. There's, if people want to follow her, she's called Boss Ovary. She's working very hard. Her research lab is working very hard on preserving ovarian function, right? So we don't have to go through menopause, or it's a much, much later time period. Right. And so, it won't work for me. And, maybe we'll be able to have it, something in the next 10 to 15 years. But if we can preserve ovarian function, we're better. So the reality is you could be perimenopausal and still cycling. It's not the loss of the cycle that you have to watch for. It's the increasing in symptoms that starts to indicate it, or your laboratory. Right. But the more you double down on a really good lifestyle, the less symptomatic you're going to be.
Got
The
it.
research bears that out.
Really, so the faster way lifestyle with our whole food nutrition, our workouts, that's the best strategy to prevent some of the un, you know, not unfortunate, but just the symptoms, the unfavorable symptoms that take place. Something that I'm curious about is you've mentioned that dementia is a midlife disease. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because dementia runs in my family, and I'm sure many of our listeners have loved ones who struggle with dementia or Alzheimer's. I really want to hear about that, and maybe even the role of um, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy on, dementia and so forth. So, can you share just a little bit with us about it?
Sure. So women are, basically 3 out of every 4 dementia/Alzheimer's patients are women, right? So this is a very female disease.
Mm.
Yes, we outlive men by 4.5 years, but our actual health span is poorer, right? So we live longer, but in poorer health. And dementia is one of those areas. So Lisa Mosconi's group out of the Weil Center in New York has done the best work here. And so what we always believed, so the dogma that we believed, not because we had any credible science, it was just somebody parroted it and everybody else ran with it, was that as you go through menopause, the number of receptors, keyhole for your estrogen, declines, particularly in the brain. And that's why we feel all these brain symptoms. And that's why we feel, because every cell in your body has a receptor for estrogen. So menopause is a full body effect. It's not just ovarian, it's everywhere. That's why it has such a big metabolic effect. And that's why weight gain is such a big part of it. So when we look at the brain, Mosconi's group figured out how to put a tracer in a brain, put an animal into menopause, and see for the first time what the brain was doing, because we could look at the receptors. We can't do that with blood work. And what they found is it's the exact opposite. When we go through menopause, the body starts building receptors like budding flowers everywhere to capture what little is left. And so what we do know is estrogen is protective to the brain. It increases brain volume, it increases blood supply to the important centers like the hippocampus and the amygdala. And it helps us with the memory centers. And when we go through menopause, our brain shrinks and remodels, and it pulls circuits away from the frontal lobe, which is decision-making, memory, and focus. And so what we do also is, if we look at the research, depending on what study you look at, the lowest I've seen is 24%. On average, it's 31 to 34% reduced risk for dementia if you do bioidentical hormone replacement.
Wow.
Into menopause and onward. And probably the cognitive issues are the ones that we know the most about, that it's better to start early, right? Like as you're going into that transition, don't wait 10 to 15 years, because that means the brain is already remodeled. We don't know that about the rest of the body. There's probably impact there, but we know that the best window is to start as you're kind of going through that process and to not stop, right? Because I think all of us, I have, dementia in my family. My mom is actually in assisted living right now. From a genetics risk standard, I have some risks. I would much rather kind of like wake up dead one day than to sit in a nursing home and slowly lose my mind.
Agree.
I think almost everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
And so we have the best chance to reduce that just by replacing the hormones at very low levels to improve when we go through menopause.
Interesting. What are your thoughts on creatine?
I freaking love creatine.
Yay!
Yeah, I love creatine, and our ability to produce it naturally declines rapidly, particularly as we hit our 40s and beyond. And so, taking creatine not only helps with muscle, but it is incredibly concentrated in the brain. Probably one of the most studied supplements on the planet, like completely safe. Just don't down a bunch of it and don't drink water. You might get cramps. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is the only supplement scientifically proven to help address dementia. I mean, that alone, some people are, oh, I get bloated. Honestly, I'm getting rid of my brain fog. I'm preventing dem like, why wouldn't I take creatine? I mean, come on. On our board here at Faster Way, we have the leading researcher on creatine in the world. And it's pretty cool and profound to read that research.
Yeah.
Okay, really quickly. So I don't understand HRT. And again, you kind of have to act like I'm just totally naive at this. So you say, start early and continue it. HRT, we're primarily talking about progesterone and estrogen supplementation. Is that, or are we like, am I just missing the boat because there's 17 other, things?
No,
And is it,
no. I would throw testosterone into that mix. And there's a few other ones like DHEA, which is a precursor to testosterone. But let's focus on the ones we have the best research on. So we have three estrogens that we make, but the most important one is estradiol. That's
Mhm.
the one that protects our brain, our heart, our bones. And that's the one that your ovaries make. So as the ovaries run out of eggs, we don't make it anymore. And it's the ovaries just go to sleep one day and they're like, we're done. Um, so estradiol is the most important one. Progesterone is also made by the ovaries, but it's made mostly at the second half of your cycle after the egg is popped out and the follicle, which kind of I like to think of it as like a sunflower, and the seed sort of sticks out and then goes boom and falls out. When that collapses, right, the egg is now popped out, the little holder of it, the seed holder collapses. That's when we make progesterone. So what happens when we get in our 40s is we're running out of eggs. We don't make the progesterone anymore because we're not always ovulating. So progesterone is really important for fertility because it prepares the uterus, but it also has this huge anti-anxiety, relaxation effect. It's a brain hormone as much as it is a body hormone. So it's usually on the decline. It's the first one to go, which is why we see insomnia and sleep issues. And then the other one is testosterone. Now, most women think of that as a men's hormone. So the first thing you need to know, Amanda, is we make more testosterone every day than we do estrogen at any given time in our cycle.
Interesting.
It's just how we measure it in the labs in the United States is a different measurements, picograms to nanograms per milliliter, right? So it looks different on the labs. We actually make a lot of it. And testosterone is on a slow roll downhill after our 20s. So it slowly declines. And so often we get less muscle mass, we have less libido, we have less motivation. It's because we don't have testosterone. And testosterone acts heavily in the brain and improves dopamine. So when we're looking at bioidentical hormone replacement, bioidentical means it looks like the exact same hormone key that you made. It's like you went to Lowe's and had a replica made. Synthetic hormones are not the same. They're like a skeleton key. They kind of look like it, but they don't work the same. And they have negative side effects in the liver because the body has to process them differently and they leave stuff behind that we don't want. So bioidentical is what you want. And generally, what we want is progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen, right? Particularly estradiol. And when you supplement with those and how you supplement with those is highly individualized, right? Women who weight train, testosterone is going to be at a greater level than women who sit on a couch. Like even men, I'll talk to like a 35-year-old and he's like, I think my test is low. I'm like, get in the gym, pump
Yeah.
some iron,
Try some
then come
intermittent
back to
fasting.
me. Guys, try some intermittent fasting, do
Yeah.
some things to help promote it, right? So you might need progesterone and testosterone first, or just progesterone, and then you might need testosterone, and then you might need, and then as you go into that transition period where estrogen is bungee jumping and then cliff diving, then you need to replace the estrogen. Which
Mm.
means there's a little more precision than just try a patch and if it works, great. Or if you can't sleep, try some progesterone, but we don't know if it's really helping you, which is how conventional medicine treats it. Conventional medicine sees menopause as a transitional period, yes, but living 30 years after it is not what we were intended to do. We should be dying right after menopause. That was our lifespan in 1900.
Whoa.
I would be dead by now. In
That
1900, I would already be dead
yeah.
because I was at the extent of our lifespan. But we live 30 to 35 years without hormones, which is now increases our risk for chronic disease, which is why I looked at it. And that's the paradigm I'm working in. I'm trying to avoid, make sure you're the healthiest as long as possible and avoid the big three, osteoporosis, dementia, cardiovascular disease, which are the biggest killers of women. It's not cancer. Cancer is actually really small.
So for someone like yourself, are you dosing with testosterone, estrogen, or estradiol and progesterone differently throughout the month? Or is it now just the same? So you're like, okay, I'm going to take, I don't know, 200 milligrams of progesterone and blah, 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 testosterone. Like, is it the same now that you're like, postmenopausal?
Yeah, it really is the same. There's no indication in the science to cycle it anymore.
Okay.
Right. Because there are people out there that'll argue, oh, we need to cycle it and mimic what you did. Look, the one thing we can look forward to in menopause is the lack of a period. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to keep that going if there's no chance of fertility. Right? Why? Like, why? And the research doesn't bear that out. So when we replace in menopause, when you're already on the other side, is we're looking for a stable level that improves all the symptoms. And literally, so everybody understands, we're using about 10%. We're hitting a blood level about 10% of what you made when you ovulated every month. It is low dose to get the help, right? And so at that point, we're probably using all three. But when you're, let's say, 45 and you're symptomatic, we might be using progesterone when it would normally be made in the second half of the cycle. And we might be using testosterone all the time, right? So every woman's a little different. And where you are on that trajectory is a little different depending on your symptoms and your family history and all that other stuff. And so, yeah, it'll change over time in most cases.
Got it. Okay. So interesting. I learn new things every day, which I absolutely love. Where can we find and follow you online?
Okay, so you can find my podcast, Menopause Mastery, on all podcast platforms. We talk about these things all day long. I
Love
love
it.
sharing the research because I think women need to be informed and it's hard for us to be informed. You can find me at bettymurray.com, and you can also find my telemedicine company called Get Manurva, and that's MENRVA, right? Is the company. And so that's where you can find my telemedicine. And I'm on
Yay.
Instagram, Dr. Betty Murray.
Love it, love it, love it. Dr. Betty, you are the best. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. I love your energy and your vitality. It gives me so much inspiration, and I appreciate what you're doing for women in wellness. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.